Ferran Arios, captain of the Ultramarine 6th Company, is a warrior forged in the fires of the Indomitus Crusade. Chosen by the Primarch to lead his brothers into battle, the Master of Rights fights for the survival of mankind and the realm of Ultramar. Hello there and welcome to this paint guide. In this video I'll show you how to paint this awesome new character quickly and easily, but so he still looks awesome. Let's get started. The paints I'm using are on screen now. Feel free to switch any of these out or just get rid of some colours entirely. Quite a few of these are highlight colours, for example, so if highlighting isn't for you, you won't be needing any of those paints. And here's also a list of the additional equipment that I'll be using. For the undercoat, I've chosen to use the rather fitting Macragge Blue spray. You could use a different undercoat if you wanted to, but this one will make the next step much easier. Speaking of which, kicking off our base coat, I'm giving all the armour a generous coating of Macragge Blue from the pot. This may seem a bit strange because the model is already blue, but the finish of the spray can and the paint pot are slightly different, so doing this means that we'll be able to cover up any mistakes later. Plus there may be areas on your mini that are still left in that grey plastic, so we can paint over those areas now. And there we are, all the armour is now fully base coated, and thanks to that undercoat it took no time at all. Up next, I'm using Abaddon Black to paint all the black areas. This includes the undersuit, some parts of the hammer and the eyes too. Feel free to pick out more or less areas with this paint if you want to. 2 thin layers later, we're ready to move on. For all the silver details, I'm using Leadbelcher. If you don't have Leadbelcher, Iron Warriors or Iron Hand Steel are some great alternatives. I'm also painting the trim with this paint. This may seem strange, as if we look on the box art, we can see that the trim is actually more of a bronze-orange colour. Don't worry about that for now, we will be painting over this later with a contrast paint to achieve that colour. Speaking about the box art, at this point it's worth mentioning that I like to keep the box art close by. I find that this helps me to make sure I'm putting the paint in all the right areas. If you've already thrown the box away, don't worry, the images on the Warhammer website will be fine instead. Next up is Wraithbone, which I'm using to base coat the servo skull and any parchment dotted around the model. There's quite a few places hiding around, so just take your time picking them out. And don't worry if you miss any, you'll soon notice when we start to continue to add our remaining base coats. For all the brown leather details, I'm using Rhinox hide. Pretty much any brown paint will work for these areas, so feel free to switch this out for something else if you want to. But I find that Rhinox hide is just a perfect dark brown tone, so I'm applying 2 thin layers to the holster, belt and any other leather details. Nice and easy. Back to metallics now. For all the gold areas except for the trim, I'm using Retributor armour. Now I'm not painting the trim with this because it's an ever so slightly different tone, so we'll be picking that out later with a different colour. And there we go, 2 thin layers of Retributor armour later, we're left with this. Up next, I'm using Corax White to paint all the different white details on the model. I absolutely love this paint. It's a slightly duller white to white scar, but that means it covers really nicely in just a few layers. So with this, I'm painting the shoulder skull, Ultramarine symbol, servo skull parchment, but you can pick out any extra areas that you fancy. With that done, I'm now moving on to all the red areas, and for them, I'm using Khorne Red. The main red details on this mini are the big pieces of cloth and the tabard too. I'm being as careful as I can when I apply this, as to not accidentally get any paint on the other areas that I've base coated. But if I do mess up, I can simply go back to the appropriate paint and fix it up. With that finished, there's just a few base coats left before we can start shading. For the Purity Seal Wax and weapon handle, I'm using one of my all-time favourite paints, Screamer Pink. With that done, all that's left to base coat is the awesome sculpted base, which I'm actually painting with Mechanicus Standard Grey. There's also an Ultramarines logo on the base, which you can paint in whichever colour you fancy. I'm using Retributor armour. And there we are, that concludes all our base coats, and now Ferran Arios is ready for shading. It's worth mentioning at this point, however, that if you still have any mistakes that need tidying up, now is the time to do that. The finish will be slightly different after we've shaded the mini, so it's really important that any mistakes are sorted out now. And speaking of shading, up next I'm using my trusty Nuln Oil all over the mini. I find that mixing in a tiny amount of Lahmian Medium here helps to reduce any staining and will help the shade flow better into the recesses. You don't have to mix this in though if you don't want to. Another thing you can do is apply the shade with a huge brush and then use a smaller one to soak away any excess paint. However you like to shade your minis, the paint will still take quite a long time to dry after this stage compared to normal. So I'd recommend leaving your mini for around 30 minutes to an hour before moving on. But when it's dry, we're left with this. The Nuln Oil has really helped to define the mini and make Ferran Arios look 3-dimensional and awesome. We're not quite done yet though. We still have to paint his iconic armour trim, and to do that I'm first layering over all the raised areas using Stormhost Silver. After the shade, these areas are a little duller, so this will bring back some punch ready for the next stage. Speaking of which, the next stage is adding Guilliman flesh over the top of all the trim. That bright silver underneath will shine through and give us a lovely bronze orange metallic. And with that done, this Mini is just about ready for the gaming table. All that's left are his eye lenses. There's lots of ways to paint Space Marine eye lenses, from traditional methods to using contrast paints, and depending on how confident you are, you may very well choose a different technique to me. But seeing as this is a captain of the 6th company, I think his eye lenses deserve a little extra attention than usual. I'm starting off with Khorne Red, using it to base coat pretty much the whole eye lens, except from leaving a tiny amount of Abaddon Black in the far corners like so. Once that's dry, I'm using Evil Sunz Scarlet in a similar way, except this time I'm painting more towards the centre and leaving some of that Khorne Red on show too. After that, I'm using Wild Rider Red to edge highlight the bottom of the eye lenses towards the centre. This is a really tricky bit, so just take your time, and if you do mess up, you can go back to the other tones and fix them up. But the more you do this, the thicker the paint will get, so be as careful as you can. While I've got Wild Rider Red on the palette, I'm also using this to highlight all the other red areas on the Mini. Finally, to finish off the eye lenses, just a tiny dot of Fire Dragon Bright in the very corner towards the centre of the face. Once again, you can use this to further highlight the red areas on your Mini if you want to as well. And there we go, the eye lenses are pretty much complete. All we need to do is add a tiny amount of Corax White in the far corners to simulate some reflections, and blammo. Some awesome looking eye lenses that really make this Mini stand out. At this point you could totally leave it here and call your Mini finished, but I think that Ferran Erios could do with a few extra highlights, so if you're interested in taking your paint job up a notch, stick around. Now that blue armour is looking rather bare since we shaded it earlier, so let's bring it to life with some highlights. First off, I'm using Macragge Blue as a subtle chunky highlight. Even though this was the same paint that we base coated with earlier, because the shade has darkened that down, this works perfectly as our initial highlight. This will take some time, but it will look awesome and be a great foundation for our next few highlights. With that done, up next is Calgar Blue. Now this is our fine highlight, so what we want to do here is place it within the chunky line of Macragge Blue that we just applied. This can be quite tricky, but I find that it can help to use the side of your brush on areas like this, which makes it just a little easier. If you are struggling to locate any areas to pick out with this, keep the box art close by as a reference image. Another thing you can do while you're at it is add tiny little scratches to the armour, and make sure your paint is really thin if you want to do this. If you make any mistakes here, feel free to go back to Macragge Blue if you think you need to. And to finish off the blue armour, now I'm using Fenrisian Grey to highlight all the sharpest edges and raised areas. Basically, I'm imagining where light would hit the model from above and picking out those edges. Same again here, you may find it helpful to refer to the box art. And there we go, those few highlights have really helped to make this Mini look truly like a character. The blue armour is obviously the main area on this model, so that little extra care with this has gone a long way. Just a couple more paints to go now. For all the metallic details, I'm highlighting them with Stormhost Silver. While I'm at it, I'm also picking out the studs on the armour. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I think it's well worth the effort. Finally, I'm dry brushing the base with Celestra Grey and painting the rim with Steel Legion Drab, and we're done. And there we are, Ferran Erios, captain of the Ultramarine 6th Company, is ready to lead his troops into battle. I absolutely love painting this Mini, and I hope you guys have too. Whether you highlighted yours or not, I'm sure it still looks awesome. Well, that's all from me. Thanks for watching this video. In the meantime, if you're looking for more tutorials, tips, and tricks, you can check out some of the other videos on the Warhammer YouTube channel, or alternatively, you can head to a Warhammer store where our friendly staff are always happy to help. Thanks again for watching, see you next time, bye bye!